Hi guys, it's Debbie and today we're talking about Italian movies. The context to this is that my mum's British, my dad's Italian, and I've lived here in Italy basically my entire life. Yet, due to a mostly international audience here on my channel, I've rarely spoken in depth about Italian cinema. And it's a shame because there's so many good modern Italian movies that a lot of people abroad just don't know about. Usually when we think of Italian cinema, we immediately jump back to the great classics or films that have been released at least 30 years ago. So today I would like to share with you some good modern Italian movies. I decided to go back to maximum COVID times, maybe there are a couple of older films sprinkled in there. And another reason why I wanted to make this video is that here in Italy there is the general sentiment that Italian cinema is dead, that the only things we get are brainless comedies. But this isn't unique to Italy. Movies that make the most money tend to be safe, family-friendly, low risk. This year the top movie in America was Minecraft. In previous years it was Barbie, superhero movies, Bad Boys, Star Wars. That's just the business. In Italy, Chicco Zalone dominates the game. Out of the top 10 highest grossing films in Italy of all time, 5 are his. He beat Endgame, Avatar, Titanic, Barbie. People don't necessarily dislike his movies, it's the monopoly that frustrates them. When one releases, cinema's shown non-stop, it dominates the news and social media, and everything else disappears. When it's not him, especially at Christmas, we often get silly comedies, and there is this general feeling that we have to rely on foreign movies to get something good. The reality is that many great Italian movies are still being released, they just get far less publicity. Some go quickly to streaming, people assume they're boring, and foreign advertising dominates. Honestly, if some of these Italian films had an A24 logo and English-speaking actors, people would be desperate to see them. So today, here are some good recent Italian films I would recommend checking out. Let's kick off with a film I watched just a few days ago and which actually is the reason why I decided to make this video, and that is Le Città di Pianura, which literally translated means Towns of the Valley, but which is internationally titled The Last One for the Road. It follows two older men who go from pub to pub, rambling about their life, and along the way pick up a much younger and very different university student, and the three of them set off on an unlikely journey through small towns in northern Italy. Now, a small premise: although my dad is from Sardinia, as you can see from my surname, I've lived basically my entire life in a small town in an area of Italy which is exactly where the film is set. I've been to many of the locations that are seen in the film and I understand perfectly the vibe that it is trying to convey. This film is not a southern Italy summer Rome and Naples, gelato, Monica Bellucci kind of film. This is fog, industrialization, grey skies, flat landscapes, abandoned houses, the quiet gothic horror and depression of those tiny towns. And as the characters move from town to town on this unlikely adventure, they open up about their backstories, we get to know much more about them, and without spoiling anything, by the end I was crying, literally crying at how whether you're a 19-year-old student or a 60-year-old alcoholic, life is just life. You'll be disappointed and enamored, let down and excited, friendships come and go, people come and go. Again, if this film had had American actors, if he had had an A24 logo slapped on it and had been set in New Jersey instead of Treviso, the reception would have been completely different. Next, let's talk about horror, because one of the biggest criticisms aimed at modern Italian cinema is that we've basically stopped making good horror films, although back in the day Italian cinema was mostly known for that. I think one of the main issues here is budget. Good horror movies often rely on good effects, and as budgets go up, Italy simply can't compete with big American productions. So when people compare them, Italian horror often ends up looking cheap. On top of that, as I was mentioning earlier, comedies and family-friendly films tend to be the safest option. That being said, in recent years, an Italian director, Paolo Stripoli, has been creating a small but praised horror filmography. His films didn't start off as excellent, but they clearly improved over time, and I really loved his latest one. His first was a classic horror story about a cult in southern Italy, which many compared to Midsummer. Then he made Piove, a very unsettling film about something being wrong with the water in Rome and the disturbing effects it had on the population. But recently he released what I think is his best film so far, and that is The Holy Boy, which I prefer by its original title, La Valle dei Sorrisi, which literally means the Valley of Smiles. It's about a town known for its residents' constant happiness, smiles and positivity, which of course hides something much darker. The protagonist is a troubled PE teacher who is assigned to work at the local school, but as soon as he arrives, his presence becomes a strange disruption in this town's perfect system, and he slowly uncovers what's really going on. I'm obviously avoiding spoilers, but I would definitely recommend checking it out. Next up is Il Nibbio, also known as The Negotiator, a solid thriller based on the true story of the kidnapping of Giuliana Sgrena, an Italian journalist who was held captive by terrorists in Iraq. The film shows both her time in captivity, but more prominently the work of the Italian secret services trying to negotiate her release. Apart from the few elements like that predictable yellow tone that everybody slaps on films as soon as they reach certain locations, and some instances of overacting, the film is well constructed. It fits into a type of tense political thriller that we usually associate with American cinema, and it proves that Italian films can handle this genre just as effectively. Next is Confidenza, Trust, a film which I actually expected to receive much higher reviews. I've been reading a lot of negative reviews about it, but a lot seem oddly vague and never get into the actual reason why they don't like this film. Putting all the pieces together, it looks like what people didn't particularly like about this film is that they found it too ambiguous, too vague, and never get into an actual point. But I enjoyed that aspect of it. I loved how it has you always craving for more information. And as you can probably tell, even here I'm trying to avoid spoilers as much as possible. The story revolves around a secret affair between a teacher and his student that unfolds over several years. But what truly ties them together and creates the tension that drives the entire film is a pact they make one night. They decide to tell each other a secret, and the teacher's secret is absolutely shocking. I'll leave it at that. Watch it and let me know what you think about it. Okay, now we're going to talk about a very popular movie, one that made it onto the International Film Awards scene, so you've probably already heard about it. And basically, everybody in Italy and their mum will tell you to watch this, and that is Ancora Domani, There's Still Tomorrow. This is one of the most praised and most popular films in Italy in the last years, and understandably so. It tells the story of a woman in post-war Rome living with an abusive husband while trying to take care of her family and secretly dreaming of a better life for herself and her daughter, all while holding on to a mysterious letter. I think this film resonated so strongly with people because it moves away from this sort of performative feminism that is often portrayed in films nowadays and shows what it actually was for women not that long ago. These people could have been our grandmothers. I remember that right after watching this film, it was time to vote here in Italy, and it was the first time I walked into the voting booth really thinking about how casually I can do it now. Well, not that long ago, it was completely unthinkable for women. Another popular film that gained attention at last year's Film Awards is Capitano. It's not in Italian. It's in multiple languages as it depicts the harrowing journey of two boys as they travel all the way from their small town in Senegal all the way to Italy. The film captures everyone and everything they encounter along the way while constantly questioning whether leaving was even the right choice in the first place. Migrants often risk their lives trying to reach Italy, often tricked into paying their entire life savings to then embark on these dangerous journeys, tragically often resulting in mass deaths at sea, if not before even reaching the sea. And this film is so moving, so touching, so realistic that many people have been advocating for it to be shown in schools. The topic of migration here in Italy often pops up in conversation very superficially as a talking point to make assumptions about immigrants as a whole or to score political points when elections come up on both sides, without really exploring the reality behind some of these stories, but Io Capitano dives straight into that reality. Another Italian movie, technically not in Italian, is Il Primo Re, The First King, which is entirely spoken in Old Latin, which completely immerses you into the setting of this film, which is Rome before it wasn't Rome, when it was just a muddy swamp before the empire it became. You can't get more Italian than that. The film is set before the massive Roman Empire, telling the legendary story of Romolo and Remo, who, according to mythology, were abandoned in the countryside, fed by a wolf, and eventually went on to found Rome. If you want a story about Rome before emperors and palaces, but full of struggle and fights and a lot of mud, this is a great pick. Next, of course, I have to mention a film many of you might heard of as it even made it to the Oscars, and that is Paolo Sorrentino's È stata la mano di Dio, known internationally as The Hand of God. The title actually hides a much darker story. It's based on Paolo Sorrentino's real life and a tragic event he experienced, but it's best discovered by watching the film, which follows his youth growing up in Naples. Naples is let's say the most divisive city in Italy. It is often heavily criticised because of widespread criminality, but on the other hand, you can't not admire its staggering beauty. The movie shows the more affluent, picturesque side of the city, highlighting beautiful architecture, traditions, the unbearable summer heat and the charm of its people, all while exploring what it means to figure out your path in life. If you've seen other Sorrentino films like The Great Beauty or even more recently Partenope, you'll notice these recurrent themes. Partenope in particular takes it basically to the extreme. Sometimes it almost feels like you're watching it just to admire the beauty of everything and anyone rather than the actual plot. Sorrentino now has also just released his new film La Grazia, which I still need to watch. I'll let you know about that one. Now let's talk about Le Otto Montagne, 8 Mountains, a film which actually has a funny backstory. Now, back in the day when this film was released, my friends and I wanted to watch it. There were very few reviews of it online, and one really stood out, which was Otto Montagne, 2 coglioni, which translated means 8 mountains, total bore, but with more swear words. That review had such an impact on us, we decided not to watch it, and then this film went on to become one of the most popular films of the years. It won awards at Cannes, Davide Donatello, and so I eventually decided to watch it. Now, in hindsight, I can see what that reviewer meant, as this film is very slow-paced, but understandably so. It spans essentially a whole lifetime of friendship between two boys who meet during a summer holiday and everything that follows, all set against the stunning northern Italian mountains. Now, looking back, having seen Train Dreams and loved it, and seeing how successful it was, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if Le Otto Montagne had been an American film instead of Italian. Another film I enjoyed, and which I think would have had way more success had it been American and not Italian, is Dogman. No, not the one with Caleb Landry Jones. No, not the 2025 animated one. I mean the one released a couple of years ago, directed by Matteo Garrone, who, by the way, is the director of Capitano, which we spoke about earlier. Garrone is one of Italy's most famous directors at the moment, probably best known for Gomorra, and in Dogman he returns to gritty crime tales from the Campania region. And when I say gritty, I'm putting it lightly. I won't say too much to not spoil the plot, but it is based on a real murder. It follows a shy, bullied man who works as a dog groomer and has a very unhealthy relationship with a violent bully who terrorizes the neighborhood, dragging him into a criminal underworld he was definitely not made for. Speaking of gritty, darker stories, I wanted to mention America Latina, which got quite low reviews, although I kind of enjoyed it. I was very curious about this film ever since the first cryptic trailer was released, although I won't recommend watching that because it kind of spoils some key elements. America Latina is a story of a man who's living happily with his family, but there is something very odd happening behind this facade. He talks about memory loss and something bizarre involving his basement. From what I read, people didn't particularly enjoy it because they found it trying to be something bigger than it actually is. Trying to be a bizarre Lantimos style project, but without ever quite reaching that. I personally don't think it's that bad. I also think some of the negative reactions were influenced too much by the director's previous movie, Favolacce, Bad Tales, which is famous for being extremely dark. One scene in particular is known as one of the most psychological traumatizing scenes in recent Italian cinema, and that's without even showing anything directly. Anyway, I won't go too deep into it. Let me know what you think about it if you've seen it. Next up is Rapito, Kidnapped, a film by Marco Bellocchio, another popular director working at the moment. Abroad, he's probably best known for Il Traditore, The Traitor, based on the true story of Tommaso Buscetta, who was basically the first mafia boss to turn against the mafia. Rapito is also based on a true story, but a completely different topic, and one which many here in Italy don't know about. A little Jewish boy who was taken from his family and brought to live in Rome and to be raised Catholic. The case caused international outrage about the treatment of Jews or non-Catholics in Italy, and it put the Pope himself at the center of a highly controversial situation. This all happened at a very critical moment in Italian history when the Pope's influence was declining, Italy was moving towards unification. The whole story is a fascinating study of faith versus family versus politics, what people are willing to do, and how a single case can have far-reaching consequences. Historians now look at it not just as an isolated story, but as one of the many events that eventually shaped modern Italy, though very few know about it. I wasn't sure how far back to go for this video, but I think we can include stuff from 2018, which wasn't 2 years ago, by the way, that was 6 years ago. 8 years ago. You're welcome. Because I think we need to mention On My Skin, Sulla Mia Pelle, which was one of the most shocking and controversial stories in Italy at the time. And I'm pretty sure it's available on Netflix, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. The film tells the story of Stefano Cucchi, who died while in detention after being arrested, and I'm not talking about natural causes. He was found beaten with countless broken bones and internal injuries. Of course, I can't show the photos, but here in Italy we all saw them and they're grim. I'm absolutely not one of those ACAB people, one of those people who blindly hate on cops, but I think this film is important because we are becoming so American-pilled, we are so influenced by what's going on in America, on their cases, on their body cam footage and debates, that we forget what happens right under our noses. Honestly, I think we're more informed about things happening abroad rather than our own country. And I'm unfortunately also guilty of this. But last but not least is La Chimera, a film which I watched embarrassingly late, but it was definitely worth it. Remember how earlier I was talking about Sorrentino's almost overwhelming depiction of Naples, its beauty and traditions? Well, La Chimera does something similar, but with a 1980s Tuscany. Here, an archaeologist has turned into a grave robber and used his peculiar skills to identify Etruscan tombs and steal the artifacts that have been buried with the bodies. The film has an entirely Italian cast and then Josh O'Connor, which might sound like a bizarre choice, but it works perfectly, and I love how this film blends grounded, down-to-earth reality, crime with a parallel, dreamlike, and almost subconscious world. But for now, I think I've talked way too much. Here are just some honourable mentions. Freaks Out by Gabriele Mainetti, about a group of circus performers trapped in war-torn Rome trying to avoid the Nazis. Amanda is one which many have said is the closest we've ever gotten to an Italian Wes Anderson movie. Pier Francesco Favino has been in a million films, but one of his most interesting recent ones is L'ultima notte di amore, Last Night of Amore, about a policeman whose last shift ever turns into an absolute nightmare. Last year we also watched Iddu, known abroad as Sicilian Letters, about Matteo Messina Denaro, one of the most wanted and powerful criminals in the world, until his capture a few years ago. Unsurprisingly, he was hiding right under everyone's noses, and this film explores his years spent in hiding. But now I'd like to know if you've seen these films, what you think about them, and if you have a favourite Italian movie. Let me know everything with a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.